Today we're going to be speedrunning Gravity Circuit. We're going to select our difficulty on a fresh file and start the intro stage. On this stage we really don't have too many things to do, so the main thing we're going to try is to stop any sort of damage, or just avoid any damage. We can take a little bit of damage like I did there, but if we can avoid taking more than 15 damage, we'll get a bonus at the end of the level, which gives us an extra 1,000 gold. We're always going to get 2,000 gold for beating each level, but getting the extra 1,000 is really important in the early stages, since we're not going to get too much gold from breaking boxes or killing enemies, and we really need that extra 1,000 when we buy our first upgrade. So you might see me do some pretty suboptimal stuff. I might walk backwards a little bit, I might slow down, I might even stop. But it's worth it to save up the money so that I can buy the upgrades, which are ultimately going to help me go faster anyways. So we're coming up on the boss here, and the boss in this stage is a little different from the rest of the game. Most bosses have an invincibility debuff that gets put on them if you attack them too much, and they also have this like bullet hell intermission phase, but this boss doesn't have any of that, so we can just hit him as much as we want and as fast as we want. And in fact, there's actually a faster way to do this boss, which I won't be doing, where you walk into the boss, press left and right as fast as possible, and then mash the attack button, and it removes all the cooldown, all the recovery from the attacks, and you can essentially attack with infinite speed, which basically lets you delete the boss in a matter of seconds. As you just saw, I didn't do that. I really don't want to risk taking the damage because, like I said, I really need that extra 1,000 for the upgrades. But it's something you can do if you want to lower your time a bit more. So here's going to be the end screen that I told you about with the bonuses. So we're going to get 1,000 for completing the level, 1,000 for completing the level quickly, and an extra 1,000 for only taking 2 damage. So now we're going to head back to the hub world, and here's where we're going to pick all of our missions and buy all of our upgrades. And this is where you get like kind of the Mega Man comparison, as you can see as I'm selecting the stage. So the first stage we're going to pick is Optic Circuit, and the reason we pick Optic Circuit and why most speedruns will pick Optic Circuit is because this stage has the easiest to access hostages. So in this game there are collectibles called hostages. They're basically just like little robots hidden throughout the stage, and when you collect a hostage you get a rescue token. Rescue tokens along with money are used to buy chips, which are passive upgrades, kind of like a double jump or making you take less damage from spikes and stuff like that. The one we're specifically after is called Catch Block, which negates all knockback, which is really going to allow for a lot more interesting routing and let us be a lot more creative with the bosses. Now as we go through this laser section, we're going to come up on our first of 4 hostages. Now like I said, the reason that we pick this stage first is because all 4 of the hostages are very close to the regular speedrunning path. You don't really have to go too far out of the way to grab them. And we need exactly 4 to get Catch Block, which is going to be basically the most important chip of the whole run. So because I'm pretty new to speedrunning, you're going to see sometimes I go for a faster strategy or a stylish strategy, and if I fail more than once or twice, I'm just going to give up and move on to the regular way. So here I try to punch this flamethrower into this soldier because it's a lot faster than hitting him. But I mess up and just decide to hit him anyways, because it's better to continue your run than to fail like 4 times and then ruin your time and then you have to start over. Another thing you'll see is I'm going to occasionally pick up these health pods. They're usually not too far out of the way, and often you can just hit them through the wall to pick them up. At this point we're reaching what is the first major deviation from the strategy that I'm copying this from. So I copied my strategy from Boss Buzz, which is the world record holder at the time of recording. His strategy is pretty high risk, high reward, and since I'm not him and I'm much worse than he is, I tend to get hit quite a bit more, and I really need this extra health to avoid dying too much, since dying is going to be the biggest time loss in this whole run. We just finished picking up our third hostage, and we're moving on to the fourth one in just a sec. So these hanging sections, there are ways to get through them faster, but they're extremely risky, and if you hit those spikes, you go back all the way to the last safe, solid ground that you stood on, which can sometimes be right there, and you only lose 2 or 3 seconds. But other times, like there, if I was to land on the spike there, I would lose 5, 6 seconds, maybe 7 seconds. So you'll see in longer spike sections, I'll probably just take the safe path. Up here, we're coming up on our first boss. All bosses have a property where if you hit them too fast, then they go into an invincible state. So I'm going to try to hit him at kind of a rhythm where I'm not hitting him too fast and not too slow. And once we get him down to a certain health, then we're going to use our burst technique to punch him into a roll, which you'll see here in a sec. So I'm going to punch him, and now we can just combo him down and touch of death him into his second phase. Between the first and second phases, there's an intermission phase where he turns invincible and can't be hit by any attack. So we're just going to have to dodge our way through this one. And then the second phase is basically the same as the first, except if we take too long, he's going to go back into the intermission phase, which we really want to avoid. Basically, all bosses are going to go exactly like this one. They have the first phase, we combo them down, we go into the intermission phase, dodge their attacks, and then go into the third phase and burst them down a second time, trying to avoid invincibility frames wherever we can. Now that we have our 4 rescue tokens and our 5,500 gold, we can go back to HQ and buy our first set of burst techniques and our first chip. We're going to be buying 2 burst techniques right now, but the main one I want to talk about is Function Overload. Function Overload is a buff to the character that gives you 1 extra double jump, lets you break any destructibles in 1 hit, and increases your movement speed by about 1.5 times the base. And you might be thinking, wow, that sounds amazing. Why don't you just use that all the time? Well, I'm going to, but there is a downside. The downside is you take 1.5 times more damage than you normally would take, which basically puts the damage to hard mode. And that means you need to be a little bit more thoughtful about when you activate it, and shouldn't activate it anytime it's available. So here I'm just going to take a moment to explain something called slide canceling. In Gravity Circuit, anytime you activate a burst technique, there's a screen freeze, but during the screen freeze, the timer for the game is still running. We don't want that, so that's where slide canceling comes in. If you activate a burst technique at the exact same moment as you enter a slide, then instead you'll only get the slide, but you'll still activate the burst, which is great because that means we can activate Function Overload for no penalty at any time. Great, now back to the run. So finally we're moving on to Power Circuit, and this is where the run gets a lot more interesting, I think, because now we have Catch Block, which stops us from taking knockback when we get hit, and we have Function Overload, which makes sure that we can move a lot faster through the levels, since we can now double jump and we have a big boost of speed. So you'll see anytime I get the chance, I'm going to be using Function Overload like I just did there to be moving a lot faster. So the main objectives for this level are going to be just to not die, and the secondary one will be to get 3 more hostages, so we can get 3 more rescue tokens. We still need to buy 1 more ability, which is Energy Multiplier, and that's just going to help us get enough energy for our burst techniques later on in the boss fights. So it's going to be a lot of the same here. We're just going to try to move through the level as quickly as possible. And see there, I got hit by the spikes, and I lost a lot of time there. So that's why I really want to avoid hitting the spikes. And here we're about to see why activating Function Overload randomly is really not a good strategy. Since we take a lot of extra damage, this section is going to do so much more damage to me than it normally would have. And since I need a lot of health to get through these lasers, I'm going to end up getting hit by one of these and dying, which is going to make me lose about 30 seconds of time. So what I should have done here is what I'm going to do now, and that's just not activate Function Overload until I get through this area after this turret. So we'll hop through here, only take a little bit of damage, and then we'll activate right here so that we can quickly get through this laser area. We're going to take a lot of damage from the lasers, but that's okay because we're getting through here a lot faster with Function Overload. And you'll see, coming up here, I'm going to stop at a repair station and get my health and energy back. I'm going to be doing that at basically every repair station I see. I've only got a maximum of 2 energy right now, and we will be coming up on an energy upgrade shortly, but it's good to keep our energy topped up for boss fights and to keep function overload up at all times. And coming up just ahead is going to be our third and final hostage. After this, we don't need to grab any more. And speaking of that energy upgrade, we're going to be getting that right now. So we've got pretty much everything we need from this level. Now we just need to get through without dying and fight the boss. This part is pretty tricky as well. It's pretty easy to lose a lot of time here. If you touch any of these spikes or you take too much damage from these shock platforms, you can really lose a lot of time to deaths and to respawning at the bottom. Now coming up on the second boss fight, it's going to be basically the same as the first fight with just a slight change since we now have Rising Upper. But you'll see here, I hit him a little bit too many times and too quickly, and he goes into invincibility. But after the invincibility wears out, we're going to hit him with Rising Upper, punch him a few times, hit him with Flying Punch, and then another hit, and Flying Punch again. And this is going to be our bread and butter combo for the rest of the run. And now that you know how the rest of the boss fights are going to go, we can breeze through the rest of the boss fights, and I won't need to explain too much after this. So we're just going to go ahead and finish this guy off. We messed up the combo there, but that's okay. Put him in invincibility, and we'll hit him a couple more times, and he's finished. So now we're going to head back to HQ, buy a couple of things, and then all that's left to do is pick up one more health upgrade, one more energy upgrade, and get through the game. So you'll see here my menuing is still pretty slow. I'm being pretty careful because I don't want to accidentally buy the wrong thing, and then end up not having enough money to buy the correct thing, and then I'm just screwed and I can't continue the run. So the next stage we're going to do is Highway. And this stage, it's really easy to die because there's a lot of stage hazards just flying around. There's these green signs, there's these electrified floors, and if I hit any of those things, I'm going to take either a ton of damage or get reset and sent back. So we want to avoid those things. And I do almost die a couple of times in this level. So this stage is going to be a lot of the same from the previous stage. We're going to try to use function overload as much as possible to stay in the air so we can avoid having to jump over all these boxes and crates and stuff. And we're going to just try to take as little damage as possible because dying is just going to ruin our run here. This stage has a couple of these hoverboard sections with these missiles coming at you. And you can jump over them, but I just find it much easier to punch them. So here I'm going to be grabbing my final energy upgrade. So that's a grand total of 4 energy. As you can see, we're just getting absolutely bombarded with signs here. Normally when you play this level in the non-speed run, they come at you pretty frequently, but not nearly this frequently. But since we're moving through the level so fast, the signs are just going to be coming one after another. Normally in a regular run, if you get hit by one of these signs or these missiles, you'll get knocked off onto the road and get sent all the way back to the beginning of the hoverboard section. But because we have catch block, there's no risk of that since we can't be knocked back. So coming up here is going to be the helicopter boss. This boss has no invincibility frames, so we can attack him as much as we want. So we're just going to jump in there and make really short work of this helicopter. I love this strategy so much. You just jump in there, dive kick him, and then just smash your face into the burst button. It's such a simple strategy, but it works so well, and it's extremely satisfying. It's too bad you only get to do it a couple times per run. So here we're going to come up on our third of the hoverboard sections. This one's a bit longer than the other ones, and you can jump through these little gaps and over the missiles, but I just choose to punch them. In the other speedruns I've watched, they always jump over the missiles, and I don't really know if there's any reason for that, if it's faster to jump or to punch or whatever. If anybody knows, please put it down in the comments below, let me know. So now we're on to the second helicopter. You already know what's going to happen, we're just going to get in there, and it's already over. Definitely give this strat a try if you ever play this game. Now before the boss fight, I accidentally activated function overload, and because of that, I now have 0 energy left. And that's going to come back to kind of bite me in the butt in a second here. Because normally what you'd do is come up here, activate function overload right about now, and then you would use it to jump over this super long section on the right, but instead I have to swing underneath it because I don't have enough energy. Alright, so now we're on to our third boss fight. This guy moves very fast, but besides that, he's basically the exact same as the other bosses. So we're going to go ahead and combo him in phase 1, dodge him in phase 2, and combo him in phase 3. So we're going to be moving on to stage 4, which is the wave circuit. It's like a musical stage. So the main thing we're going to be looking out for in this stage are the speakers. All the speakers in this stage run on a cycle of yellow, blue, and red. So we really don't want to be jumping at the same rhythm as the speakers. Otherwise, we're going to take damage from every single speaker. So up here you'll see I'm going to jump on one of these speakers, but I'm going to jump to the second one to avoid taking damage from all 3 speakers as they activate. This level is very vertical, so we're just going to be double jumping up pretty much the whole entire level, either taking elevators or jumping straight up. The other big hazard in this level are these little musical stands that shoot these notes here. Anytime we run into those musical stands and they fire a note at us, we're always going to try and punch the note because they do way more damage than any of the other hazards in this level, and we could easily die from one of them. You can see there's these little red, yellow, and blue jump pads situated throughout the level. If I wait on them, they'll spring me up, but waiting is a lot slower than jumping on the wall. So now we're coming up on our final of the upgrades. This one is our last health upgrade. So now we have a grand total of 2 health upgrades and 2 energy upgrades, and that's it for all the collectibles in the run, and we're just going to be going straight through to the end now. So something I really love about this game is that there aren't really any skips or bugs or exploits or anything like that. It's all just getting through the game as fast as you mechanically can. And the movement in this game is really awesome. You've got the grappling hook, you've got the wall jumps. The movement is really snappy. You can turn in the air right away. There's no delay. The speed is really high. The combat is really fun. So you will be dying a lot at first while you're learning the speed run. But once you get it down, you just fly through the game and it feels really amazing. Alright, so we're getting to our 4th boss now. This is one of the cooler bosses in the game, and this is actually the first one I think that I get perfect. So this is a good example of how fast a boss fight can go. Moving on to the 5th stage is Patch Circuit. On this stage, there aren't too many things that we need to look out for. There are some hydraulic presses that can stop you and send you back a little bit, but even those, getting hit by them is just a minor time loss, so it's not a big deal if we get hit by those. Normally when you do this run, there are these slime extruders that drop these little slime balls from the ceiling. If you don't have catch block and you get hit by those, you get stuck in this gel ball and it just throws you down the pit or sucks you to the floor, and then you have to hit your way out. Those can really slow you down in a normal run, but with catch block, you can just damage boost right through them, so they're no problem. That said, this section can kill you. If you accidentally grappling hook one of the slime balls, it will eat your grappling hook and you'll fall into the spikes. So you do have to be a little bit careful. So coming up here is going to be our 2nd mini boss. He also doesn't have invincibility frames, so you can guess exactly what's going to happen to this guy. Bing, bang, bong. Easy peasy. Now coming up, there are some hydraulic presses. These hydraulic presses can pretty easily smash you. Even if you perfectly time the first one, there's no way, as far as I know, to get under the last one without being smashed. Alright, on to the boss fight. So this one I get pretty fast as well, so we can just watch through this one. I really like the boss combat in this game. Once you get the combat down, the combos really feel like you're landing a true combo in Smash, or just like a regular combo in Street Fighter. It really is so satisfying to combo down the boss, and they have zero opportunity to stop you. But since it does require a little bit of timing and a little bit of skill, you're not going to get it every time, and when you do land it, it feels amazing. Now we're moving to the cooler circuit. Cooler Circuit is probably my favorite level out of the 8 standard levels, because this stage has a little bit of every single kind of movement in the game. There's these breakable blocks, there's these falling icicles, lots of wall jumping, floating platforms, avoiding enemies, lots of places where you can jump through the air and do dive kicks to save time, lots of sliding. There's lots of interesting movement in this stage, and it's a lot of fun once you get it down. It's a pretty difficult stage though, because there's icicle spikes everywhere, and if you touch them, you're going to teleport back, or even worse, you're going to have to watch that black screen, and that's going to take tons of time. But if you can get this stage down, the movement is so much fun, and you can just fly through the stage so fast. A great example is coming up, where we're going to use dive kicks to jump off the enemies in the sky to avoid any difficult platforming. So here I try to go for style points. I'm going to try to swing through this gap here, but I do it a bit too soon and teleport back. But that's okay, we can just try it again. So something I haven't talked about too much in this game is the dive kick. Since the dive kick has a startup animation where you spin before the dive kick, even just doing a regular dive kick seems pretty difficult to use and pretty situational. Like here, where I dive kick through this hole. But actually the dive kick has other uses as well. Since it stalls you in the air, you can use it to extend your jumps when you're jumping over especially large gaps. And when you don't have your double jump active, it can really help you get over some tricky enemies or tricky areas. Shortly we'll be fighting the boss on this stage, and this boss can be a bit frustrating for a couple of reasons. So the stage here has 2 pits on the sides, and if you combo an enemy from their roll into the pit, then they just respawn in invincibility. So we need to avoid doing that. And the second thing is, this boss can fly, and while he's in the air, it's going to be really difficult to get anything started on him. So if we get unlucky, or we take too long to start the combo, he's just going to fly into the air, and all we can do while he's up there really is just hit him with the grappling hook. We can dodge this intermission. I managed to get a good hit here into the combo, and I drop it, but that's no problem. I can just hit him a couple more times, and he's done. Onto our final 2 stages of the main game, we'll be doing Cipher Circuit next. In my previous runs, this stage and the next stage have been the cause of a majority of my resets and my deaths. That's because this stage has way more spikes than any of the other stages, and it also has a lot of pits and hazards, so there's a lot of opportunity for you to get reset, which can really cause a huge time loss. Here we have one of the more unique parts of the game. So there are these 4 laser barriers and 4 portals. In each of the portals there's a block that you break that unlocks the gate. And when we break the block, we don't need to go through the portal. Instead, we can just reset our checkpoint. So you'll see when I get to this block here, we're going to hit it 4 times and then quickly pause and reset the checkpoint. We're going to do that for all 4 of these, and that will help us get through this area a lot faster. Now this boss coming up is a real piece of work. Nobody likes this guy. The main reason this boss is so annoying is because of the actual stage. Unlike the other boss fights, which are completely flat, this one has platforms in it, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to move around. When you combo him, he can bounce off the platforms, and sometimes the bounce is weird and you can't chase him down, and he might even fall off of the edge, which is even worse. The second reason why this boss sucks is because he teleports around the boss room, and depending on which platform he teleports to, it can be really difficult to combo him, and sometimes you might not even be able to get up to him since he teleports so fast. So this boss can really waste a lot of time. Now on to the final stage before Arc Crash Circuit. As I said before, this stage and the last stage caused a lot of my deaths in my previous runs. And unlike the last stage where the main hazard was the stage hazards, in this stage the main problem is going to be these enemies. I'm not really sure what they're supposed to be, but I think they kind of look like goblets or like wine glasses or something. Maybe they're supposed to be mining drills, but anyways, they do so much damage, so much more damage than any other enemy in the whole game. If I get hit by one of these enemies, I basically lose a quarter of my health bar, which you're going to see in just a moment because I cannot dodge these guys to save my life. Look at that damage. It's so much. I lost. So you'll see when I am around these guys, I'm going to try very hard not to get hit, even if that means I need to stop, because I'm already taking so much damage as is, I can't really afford to take damage from these enemies too. Finally, in this stage is where you're going to see us taking advantage of Function Overload's ability to break blocks in one hit. So normally these sand blocks take 3 to 4 hits each, depending on how damaged they are when they roll down the conveyor belt. So having Function Overload on means we can hit them all in one hit regardless of how damaged they are, which means we can blow through those areas much faster. In previous runs, this part was the part where I always died, but I decided to take the safe route and just take the mech here. So you'll see I continuously keep jumping in the mech. That's because when you normally do a standing attack in the mech, he does 2 hits and then you can't move until you finish the attack. So I'm instead doing an air attack, which gets cancelled when we hit the ground, and that means we can move a lot quicker. And you see I already lost the mech to damage. If that was my character, I would be dead. So I'd rather let the mech take the damage and I lose a little bit of time, than take the fast strat and die and need to start completely over from the last checkpoint. This boss is going to be pretty simple. He doesn't do anything too crazy, and his intermission phase is pretty short. So we're just going to breeze through this guy in no time at all. So we finally finished the first 8 stages, and now we're on to the final boss world, which is called Arc. Arc is split into 3 different main stages, and all of the stages are going to be like a combination of all the stages that we did before. So every enemy, every stage hazard, any sort of like interactable section, this is going to have all of those combined into one. But first we have to make it into the actual Arc. This part is pretty long, so I'm going to take my time and kill some enemies just to make sure I don't take too much damage. Again, I'm really trying to avoid those goblet enemies because I really don't want to lose a quarter of my health just by getting hit once. And now, once we pass the turret, we're home free, so we can just activate Function Overload. These stages are really interesting and really fun to do, and there's a lot of really cool movement that you get to try in these levels, but they're also much harder than the rest of the game, and it's very easy to die, especially because the checkpoints in this level and the other 2 levels of Arc are going to be super far away from each other compared to the other levels. So we're going to need to be a lot more careful with our use of Function Overload. And you'll see I'm picking up all the health that I can get here. I don't want to take any chances on dying here. Especially in these green sections. These areas are some of the most risky in the whole game because, as you can see, there's spikes everywhere and we're going to be doing a lot of swinging. Anytime there's a long swinging section, if you fall, it means you're going to teleport all the way back to the beginning of the swinging section. And that's going to lose so much time for us. This area seems simple, but actually is one of the most dangerous parts. The wind tunnels actually cancel your swinging animation. So if you swing on top of one of these wind tunnels and aren't paying attention, you'll just fall straight into the pit and have to start all the way back from the beginning. This fight is basically like from Legend of Zelda, like Shadow Link. So when you get to this point in the story, you find out that this character is actually like the predecessor for the powers that you had and has all the same abilities and powers that you do. So this boss is pretty unique because he has a dodge roll, so he can just decide, nope, I'm not going to get hit by that, and then just move right out of the way. Which, if you miss more than once, is going to mean that you don't have enough energy to do the whole combo, and it's going to slow down the entire fight. And then, just as you think the fight is over, then he busts out a surprise third phase. In this phase, he starts to get all the burst techniques that you have as well. So what we're supposed to do here is, when he does that flying punch across the screen, we're supposed to let him hit us and then combo him to death after that. But since I'd previously died a bunch of times on this boss, and I was too scared to look up at my health, I just decided to play it safe and dodge everything manually. And that's the first stage of Arc finished. Arc 2 is where things start to get really difficult, and I spent a lot of hours practicing this stage in particular. There's lava everywhere, and the lava gets treated exactly the same as spikes, so anytime we land on this lava, we're going to get sent back to a platform. And there are spikes and lava sections all over the place here, which means we're going to get sent back very far. Checkpoints in this game are also extremely far apart, so it's extra important to be careful on this stage. I decided to kill the bat here because if you dive kick too early, you'll bounce up into the spikes and lose some time, and I just didn't want to take the risk. Now over here there are some platforms that move around. They are on a cycle, but the cycles in this game are a little bit loose, so you do kind of have to know the strategy on the fly and kind of have to wing it as you see where the platform is when you get into frame. In this part, we can just damage boost through everything. It's no big deal. We have plenty of health, and if we take too much damage, there's a checkpoint right here, which I'm going to use anyway. Coming up is an opportunity for a pretty big time save. There are one of these hanging platform sections, and you can jump through here, jump off the wall, and go around, which I do attempt twice, but I end up not getting it, and just in the interest of not choking this entire run, I decide to just do it the normal way and take the time loss. If I had more time to run this game, I would have definitely practiced that part a lot more. And here I'm killing this enemy to get back some more energy because I used up all my energy trying to do that time skip, and I really would like to have some energy to make this jump coming up. There's another opportunity for a time skip up here as well with the second platform section. But this one doesn't save nearly as much time, and if you mess it up, you lose a lot of time, so I just decided to not do it. Now here is my least favorite part of the entire game. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, I really cannot do this little platforming section. So I'm going to destroy all the little walls and the enemies with my grappling hook before even trying it. Anytime I try to do it the fast way, which is jumping and hitting the walls as you go through, I always end up accidentally double jumping or end up falling into the spikes, and that sends you all the way back down to the bottom of that whole section. So now we're moving on to what essentially is boss rush mode. We're going to start by having to kill this crystal, and after we kill the crystal, it's going to turn into like the element of one of the bosses. The order of the actual bosses is completely random. Thankfully, the crystal doesn't have invincibility, so we can burst him down with the same method from the mini bosses. Now once we kill this element of this boss, then it teleports us into a simulation of the boss that happens after their animation phase. So we only need to fight one phase per boss. For each boss, we're going to need 3 energy so that we can do the full combo. So that means during the crystal phase, we can't always use the mini boss method to kill him. So occasionally we are going to need to just hit him normally and save up our energy for those boss fights. And thankfully, as you just saw, we're going to get health between each boss, so we can be a little bit risky and we can take a little bit of damage here and there. And even if we did die, we only get sent back to the boss that was before the boss we died on, which still sucks a lot, but it's a whole lot better than going all the way back to the start. Alright, and with that final hit, this boss is over and we're on to the final level, Arc 3. Arc 3 is a little bit like the Cipher Circuit that we saw before, in that it's not one long stage. It's basically just 4 mini stages in one stage. And each of the 4 mini stages only has 1 checkpoint. And they're all pretty long, so we're going to really need to be careful that we don't die, or we're going to lose 30 seconds to a minute. So the final stage is Arc 3, and Arc 3 is a little bit like Cipher Circuit in that it's got 4 mini stages instead of 1 long stage, each of them having their own theme, and each of the stages only has 1 checkpoint. So we really need to make sure we don't die here. If we die, we're going to lose 30 seconds to a minute at least, depending on how far into the stage we actually die. In the first mini section, our main goal is to not touch this purple laser. If we touch the purple laser, then we have to go back and touch that button to open these gates again. So as long as we don't touch the purple laser or die, we're just going to get through this nice and smooth. This next section is the easiest of the 4. This one, the main thing is these green blocks. Depending on which side you touch, spikes will spawn on the blocks. So as long as you're moving quickly, they're really no problem. And even if you do get hit, they don't do that much damage. So we'll quickly get through this and move on to the next one. On the red stage, the mechanical difficulty of this level isn't that high. But there's just so many things that can do damage to you, and they all do so much damage that dying is a pretty huge threat here. So I'm going to try my best to dive kick onto these mines to stop myself from taking too much damage, but I will end up missing a couple of them, which is going to eventually cause me to die here. So here I'm going to miss my dive kick and fall into the pit. Then I decide it couldn't hurt to say hi to the pit one more time, and then a third time. Me and the pit are basically best friends at this. Okay, so this time I don't miss the dive kick. I damage boost through this guy. And I almost fall in the pit again. But right as I'm about to fall into the pit, I managed to save myself with a last second rising upper. So that's area 3 done. And on to the blue area. The blue area is the hardest of the 4 by far, and that's because of these spiky, disappearing blocks. Every time you hit these blocks, you only have like 2 or 3 seconds to get through them, and if you get hit by the block, you get sent back to the closest platform. Having to wait for the reset on its own is already frustrating, but if you die from these blocks and get sent all the way back, that's going to really throw you off your game for the rest of the run. So we're going to be extremely cautious in this area and not get impatient. So with the 4 areas done, we're on to the final boss. We just got to make it through this little enemy section first. There's a lot of really deadly enemies in this area, but we have enough health to just tank through all of it. So as we do the run up to the boss, I just want to take this time to thank any of you guys who have stuck through the video this whole time. It's been a super long video, and it took a whole lot longer to make than I ever thought it was going to. So genuinely, for anybody who made it all the way to this point, you're awesome. Now without any more delay, let's finish this run. The final boss is comprised of 2 stages. The first one is against Kernel, and the second one is against Commander. For the Kernel fight, it's pretty easy, we're just going to combo him down. But in the second phase of the Kernel fight, he's going to get a shield, which we need to break before we can start to combo him. Once we break this, we only have a few moments before he gets another one, so we really have to take advantage and kill him right now. After the fight, he's going to give us most of our energy back, and since we avoided most of his attacks, we're in pretty good shape to fight the final boss. The final boss has 4 main attacks: his ground pound, a giant laser beam, this machine gun he shoots out of his eyes, and these little orbs he spawns on the screen. So my general strategy is going to be when he lifts his hand up to shoot the laser beam, I'll swing off of his hands and punch him in the face. Then, when he does his ground pound, we're going to jump on top of his hands and jump over to get some more hits in. Besides those 2, we'll get a few occasional hits, but I'm really just looking out for those 2 and avoiding damage anywhere else. Now that we've finished off his first phase, he gets a shield that now covers his core, and we need to break that if we want to do any damage. So once we open up his shield, we're going to use as many specials as we can to do all the damage possible. After this next round of hits, he should be on to his 3rd phase. In the 3rd phase, he loses his hands, but he starts spawning little adds. We're going to break these adds and use the grappling hook to throw them into his face, which breaks open his shield and allows us to do damage. And we only need 2. With the final hit on Commander, that is time. Thank you to anyone that stuck all the way through to the end. This was my first time doing a speedrun. I thought it was going to be very tedious, but actually it ended up being super fun and rewarding. The original time I was going for was under 1 hour, and after doing my first speedrun and getting close to almost 2 hours, I felt that getting 1 hour was kind of out of reach. But on day 6, I ended up getting a 1:10, and even though a 1 hour time still felt pretty impossible for me, I decided to give it one more run, and that was this one. Anyways, this video is already getting super long, so thank you guys for watching, and if any of you have comments or suggestions, or if there's any other games you'd like to see me speedrun, please put it down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.